Well, Dion, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and having a chat because we've got so much to talk about. We're going to spec out a new guitar together, but you've got a really interesting sort of kaleidoscope of things that you do that, beyond just guitar making, but you also build amazing guitars. So I think everybody's gonna be really excited to hear all about that. So we were just discussing before we hit record that you also farm, and you were
Yeah,
telling me a little bit about how you got into that. So for folks who don't know, you are based in Alberta now, right?
right. That's
Yeah.
sort of the west center of the country. Yeah.
Hmm. But you said you're from Saskatchewan and then had gone to Montreal, which I assume was for Luthier school, right?
No, that was. I
Oh.
mean, it was to pursue guitar building, but
Hmm.
um, living in rural Canada, internet wasn't really much of a thing, you know, early on in my career. But I felt like Montreal would be a good place to maybe meet some other builders. I
Okay.
had
Yeah.
built one guitar or a few guitars, and I moved there and met Jeremy Clark of 52 Instruments and Michael Kennedy
Hmm.
of Michael Kennedy Guitars, and they had just started, the two of them, Mile and Guitar Co-op. So I was the third member to join there. I just
Okay.
bumped into them at a party, and in the first couple of months I was in Montreal and was welcomed in. So yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. So yeah, so I guess maybe back up for just a second. And so you only built one guitar at that point. So how did you get into woodworking and guitar building?
Yeah, I guess I built a few, maybe three. Um, I've always been kind of a tinkerer, I've always had projects on the go. And I'd quit university, moved to the mountains. I was snowboarding for a year or a bit better. And I was home in the summer working on my family farm. A friend was back and he had this old acoustic guitar that had been spray painted silver. And we naively thought, like, well, let's just strip the paint off. It's probably beautiful wood and we'll put some oil on it. At this point, I like just started playing guitar a little bit. I was 22 or 23. And we stripped it back and it was like plywood, and the front was actually plywood with a wood grain plastic veneer sticker on top of it. So I thought, well, there's got to be something better than this. And the internet for us was quite new, so I did a little Ask Jeeves search,
Ooh, really far. Yeah, going
and
back to the early aughts.
yeah, yeah, on dial-up and for a guitar building kit, and it came up with a school that was actually only 3 hours away from me. Timeless Instruments, run by David Freeman. And because I had quit school and was no longer living in the mountains, I was kind of looking for something to do. So I signed up for the course right there and then I built a guitar with David, and I built a couple on my own in my parents' garage. And then I was just looking for places to get better at it, and thought I'd better move to Montreal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that totally makes sense. It's such a hotbed for builders. Wow, that's
Yeah,
that's cool. So once you got to Montreal, you joined up with Michael Kennedy, and who was the other builder?
Jeremy Clark
Okay.
of 52 Instrument Company. He's a classical builder.
Okay. So how
Yeah.
long were you there?
Um, my sense of time is terrible. I don't see anything in a linear fashion. I think like 3 years, maybe 3.5 years, something like that.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then during that process, you were just sort of already launching into building your own guitars, or was there apprenticeship going on or anything?
No, it was really informal. They had just finished, both of them, an apprenticeship with Sergey Dion,
Hmm.
who is a builder that kind of flies under the radar, but is one of the very early sort of hand builders.
Yeah. How do you say his name again?
He apprenticed Sergey Dion.
DeYounga. Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
Dutch name. Yeah.
We've got one of his guitars, and I'm always like, I don't know how to say this. So
Yeah,
now I
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's an amazing builder, and
Hmm.
he apprenticed with Larrivee. I think he was Larrivee's first apprentice,
Hmm.
and he worked with Grit Laskin and Linda, and they're all friends. So Jeremy and Mike had been apprenticing with Sergey for 3 years, I think, and had just moved to Montreal, and were looking to start something. And I kind of bumped into them at that time. And so I rented a bench. We just split the rent three ways, and they were really generous. They opened their books and shared, all of their insights with me that they had gleaned over those 3 years with Sergey. And that's really where things launched. I then applied for a grant, a small business grant in Quebec, in Montreal, and got it. And that was not a huge amount of money, but it was $18,000, and that was enough that I could eke by for the whole year without having another job and just focus on building guitars. And that's when things really took off. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Um, and so then how long did you stay in Montreal? Um, did you go straight from Montreal back to Alberta, or was there anything in between?
No, I came here. So I had made a brief stop here before I moved to Montreal from Saskatchewan. Um, just looking to move to a bigger center because I'm from a very rural place. And I met my now wife uh, here at that time, and very quickly after we started dating, we both moved to Montreal together.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so she moved back from Montreal, I think a year before me, because she was going back to do her master's degree, and then I came back and joined her. This is where her family's from, and it's closer to my family,
Hmm.
etc. Yeah.
Yeah. How far is it? I mean, I should know more because like I'm being a Montanan, but like, what is the drive time to go back and visit your family?
Well, for me, it's like again, I work in kilometers, not miles, but it's 500 kilometers. It's about a five
Oh,
hour
okay.
drive,
That's not too
6 hour
bad.
drive.
Yeah.
No, but for scale from here to Montreal, I think distance wise, I'm actually closer to the Mexican border than I am to
Yeah.
Montreal.
That's so
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, the distance like going west once you're like out that far in the country is just kind of bananas.
yeah. It's
Um,
huge.
yeah. So now, so you set up your workshop in Alberta and you were telling me a little bit about the farming before that, but how long like how many different workshops did you go through how am I trying to phrase this question?
Yeah,
Um, what does your life in Alberta look like? Like how did you end up setting up your workshop and then also doing the farming?
yeah. So when I first got back, I've always been interested in agriculture, but less on the scale that I grew up doing, which was all big equipment and chemical intensive. Um, I've been interested in vegetable growing since I was 20 years old or something. So I was always wherever I lived, including Montreal, I'd have things growing on the balcony or wherever. So when I landed here, I wanted to start another cooperative, and I wanted to find agricultural land. I never imagined that I would find 2 acres of undeveloped land in the middle of the city with university support, but that is what I found. So when I first got here, I opened up a artist collective called Ficus Studios, and I ran that for 5 years. We had shoemakers, bicycle frame makers, photographers, theater makeup. We put on shows. It was a cool
Oh,
place.
yeah.
But unlike the Milan Guitar Co-op, where it's all guitar builders, the diversity of craft and art um, pulled on my time too much to manage it all, and I found I wasn't getting enough of my own building done. So
Hmm.
when the lease ran up, I ended that and moved into a smaller shop with two of my friends that I met through there, and taught them both how to build guitars, and they now run their own guitar companies as well. That's Turley Guitars and Tunatone Instruments. Um, and when operating that artist collective, I met a guy named Stacy, and his partner Maureen came by, and she told me about this garden. So I went out and joined her out there, and that was 12 years ago. And it turned out to be like a 5 minute bicycle ride from my house, and I've just never left. And eventually, Maureen and myself have now taken over the management of it. So yeah, that was kind of the
Wow.
trajectory. A lot of serendipitous moments, I guess.
Yeah, that's really cool. It seems like, especially with the guitar making world, there's just so much of like a collaborative effort with other folks. And so it's really cool to hear about how you learned so much back in Montreal and then sort of went on to do a similar thing and also be involved with all these other artists. And then, yeah, like that's such a fascinating trajectory. Do you feel like the farming informs your guitar making in any way?
Yeah, well, I mean, it took me a long time to undo the conditioning of, not intentionally, not that there's something wrong with the conditioning, but of the school life, high school, university, where you go somewhere, you do something, and then you leave it behind. And I had to return to what I'm more familiar with, which is the integration of work and the rest of life. That's the farm life that I grew up on. So so all that to say that I think that I can't separate it all, you know. The shop, my home, my kids, the garden, it's all kind of none of it seems like work, and it all seems like work.
Hmm.
So in terms of influence, I would say that just um, it provides me with a quiet place to and a place where I can direct my mental energy elsewhere. And in those moments, I think that's where my best thinking about guitars comes, is when I'm not intentionally surrounding myself with thinking about it, when it's running in the subconscious and I'm
Right.
doing something else. And I think that the farm or the garden really provides that, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And it's just to have two kind of distinct disciplines that you participate in alongside each other. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, Going back to the artist collective, do you feel like your experience working with all these different folks who are involved in different crafts influenced your aesthetics at all, or anything about what you do?
I think that my aesthetic sense has, like, the sense has always been there, and I've learned to pull it out. So I wouldn't say that the aesthetic sense was informed, but certainly technique. I mean, there were furniture makers there.
Okay.
Um, I just I learned, yeah, I learned something from everybody in terms of all their little crafts and ways they do things, you know,
Hmm.
that informed the way I think about building guitars. And because I didn't come through an official apprenticeship, I don't have in my mind that this is the way you build guitars. I'm pretty willing to adopt things, run them past friends and peers to make sure I'm not making a bad decision. Um, and I think that was definitely informed by being around such a multidisciplinary group.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like that kind of your guitars. I mean, a lot of folks do the sort of the understated, elegant approach, but like your guitars have a really distinctive style to them that I think now that I know that like you did sort of have this different path that wasn't an official apprenticeship, an official like going to a specific school or anything. I think that kind of explains that a little bit more. And that's, yeah, again, just a really cool thing to learn about you.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks. I think it's the more so the garden I also feel like is a place where I get to design. You know, I design a
mhm.
layout and a color palette and all of that. And I've realized that um, that what I like most, including about guitar building, is designing. And I guess when I think back, I've always been kind of designing stuff. I just didn't grow up in a world where people talk about design or anything. I grew up on a farm, you know.
Hmm.
But I think that my sense of paring things back has always been there. If I think about, I played in, you know, bands over the years, and I was probably like the most annoying bandmate because I just want to practice and practice and practice. I don't want to perform unless things are perfect, and I always want to pull it back, like make it shorter, get rid of that solo. I like buildings that are brick and rectangular with nice windows. I like jeans and a t-shirt that fit right and the colors
Hmm.
go together. You know, I just that's always been my aesthetic for kind of everything
Yeah.
is like a proportions and color palette and quality materials. So
Yeah, just the essentials and like yeah, I guess it seems like your guitar designs the yeah, what am I trying to say? Just the thought that's put into just the absolute core elements of it. There's not a lot that like is going to distract you from anything, but every single thing is just so perfectly well thought out. And yeah,
it can
I like
flop if you don't have that.
yeah.
If you don't have the, like, it's not just. I was talking to. Oh, now I'm going to mispronounce someone's name. Thonis Fick, Tunis Fick. Do you know who I'm talking about? It's the South
Yeah.
African.
I'm not sure how to say his first name either. If it's I keep saying Theonis, but I'm not sure if that's right.
Yeah, I'm probably ruining it. But I did an interview with him maybe 2 years ago, and he was talking about how he identified my guitars not as like simple or without detail, um, but sort of like very cohesive, so that the details themselves don't stick out. They're full of detail,
Exactly.
and I think that my early attempts were very pared back still, but they missed because I couldn't. I didn't have the woodworking chops to get things crisp. I didn't understand proportion of guitars as well, and so they were simple, but they flopped, and now they stand. You know,
Hmm.
so it did take some time to get that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like in some ways that's maybe even harder because there isn't anything else to distract you from the essentials and like making sure that it's all perfectly right. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Well, awesome. So I want to do a little sidetrack to your music, just to find out more about what you've played and what your musical interests are and how those influence what you do with your own guitars.
Yeah, um, I don't play much these days. Uh, I feel like I get a pretty one-track mind, and now whenever I hold a guitar, I feel like all I can do is analyze it. You know, I feel like it's not a very good conduit these days, though I'm certain I will return. But the music I play and the music I listen to really has very little. I like um, sort of more lo-fi stuff. Um, I like a lot of soul music as well. I love like '90s R&B, like Janet Jackson, Sade, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Those are my main musical. The bands I played in were sort of yeah, lo-fi rock and roll bands. But my real favorite kind of music is yeah, R&B type stuff.
Hmm. Oh, so that's
Yeah.
interesting. So yeah, because it seems like your guitars are sort of more, I mean, not that you have to play only one style, but like especially like your number four model, I think is really well suited to finger style, but it doesn't really sound like that's much of a thing for you as a player yourself.
No, but I think the elements that make a good fingerstyle guitar um, also make just a good guitar in general.
Hmm.
Um, and that's like a adequate volume, good sustain, clarity between notes, evenness across the register, these sorts of things. But what I will say is that, well, there's a lot of talk about like the guitar being dead, sort of, which is obviously not true. But I think that an acoustic guitar and the pull to an acoustic guitar for me is that it's a songwriting tool. If you know It'd be interesting to find out how many songs across a wide variety of genres started with someone playing an acoustic guitar.
Hmm.
And so the more dynamic that acoustic guitar, the better songwriting tool it is, and that's often how I think about guitars, which I guess makes them also good for fingerstyle composition.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you ever build electric guitars that you might play yourself?
I I have only one electric guitar, and I did build it, and I do intend to do another run someday for fun. It was sort of it's called Boxy the Space Hog. I, I made it in Montreal at a time when I'd reached a bit of a barrier. I was French polishing. I just felt like I couldn't get it right. I was stripping it and French polishing and stripping it, this one
Hmm.
guitar. And I decided I wanted to just do something that was simpler. So I used whatever scraps we had around, including 2x4s for the center column, and made this a hollow square kind of Bo Diddley style with a classical guitar headstock. Guitar, stained it with yellow onion skins, and then gave it a coat of linseed oil. And it sounds fantastic, and it's very, very quirky and interesting looking. I'd like to do a run of those someday again, but just the one, that's all I've ever built. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your models. Why, so first of all, why is there only a 3 and a 4 and not a 1 and a 2?
They, yeah, and why aren't there more? Because I can't let anything go if it doesn't seem right to me in
Hmm.
terms of design. So I just discontinued them.
Okay.
They were early models, and they just didn't feel. Each model after that felt like it was so much better that the old models didn't live up to that anymore. And in fact, the number three I'm not even really building right now, because there's one line in the shape that I just can't deal with, and I hope to revive it one day. But yeah, so that's why there's very few models.
Well, I think it's cool when Luthiers really focus on just a small handful and really perfect those. And obviously, it's something like the OM is, or an OM mid-sized inspired shape is maybe the most universally appealing way to go. And so
Mm-hmm.
your number three is sort of more like a double O in size, roughly, right?
Yeah, that's right. But it's got quite a high waist, and it's a fairly wide waist, sort of dreadnought-ish, but small.
Hmm.
Um, and so it has a lot of a lot of active soundboard area. It's quite a loud, quite a big sounding guitar.
Oh, cool. I don't think we've had one of your number threes since I've been working at TNAG. So yeah, I hope you do continue those at some point. What
Yeah,
were the 1 and 2 smaller than 3 and 4, or just not
yeah.
really like in an order?
There wasn't any particular order. They would be double O or verging on OM sort of size.
Hmm.
But a guitar shape is complicated. One, might think it's, there's the curve of the lower bout and the waist and the upper bout, but it's all the lines between that are really, really hard to just get right.
Hmm.
And so they all had little spots they just didn't like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you decide upon your designs? Was there a particular, because I always kind of relate things back to Martin as being, or Martin or Gibson, but
Mhm.
like it seems like a lot of folks now are, that's obviously sort of the template in anybody's mind, but you might not necessarily be starting with that like in a concrete way. So how did you end up where you are with your models now?
Yeah, I early on it was really just drawing and seeing what I came up with, and with no experience, no understanding of where I was trying to go.
Hmm.
But when I designed the four, I was really, I had come to understand that the OM was quite a popular and versatile model. And so I sort of took stock of the range of, widths of the lower bout and upper bout and waist and length and all that stuff. And I plotted those all out. And then I started drawing until I got something that I was fairly happy with. And then I actually scanned it and sent it to my childhood friend, who's a graphic designer and does all my design work for me. And he put it into some computer program and just helped me correct lines, and he'd send me a version. I'd print it off, I'd make notes, I'd scan it, send it back to him, back and forth on that to kind of get the shape. And I guess one of the reasons I haven't finalized another shape yet is that I feel like there's a lot of pressure riding on it. That Model 4, pretty much as soon as I released it, it kind of made my career. I got busy after that. It wasn't just because of that. There was a lot of timing, but I just got busy with a bit of a backlog of orders for number 4, and I just kind of focused on that. So that's where I'm at.
What do you do bracing wise? Do you do just standard X brace, or do you do something a little bit different for your guitars?
Let me show you. I have one right here I'm working on. So I have done all sorts of bracing patterns. I've done lattice and my variations on an X brace, but I'm doing something, I don't know if you can see this here,
Yeah,
like this these days. So
interesting.
I haven't named it or anything, but I guess it would be certainly influenced by, obviously there's an X sort of element to it. And also when I first saw felt cape bracing, it made a lot of sense to free up this area in the waist a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, they've got this sort of curved brace that comes like that. Because not only do you lose this area in terms of sound producing, but the X brace, where it intersects with the waist, stiffens up the upper part of the lower bout so much as well that you lose a bunch of potential sound producing real estate. And so the U brace creates this it's all coupled together, very sturdy center column to carry the load of the strings, and leaves you a lot of open real estate to make sound with. So
Oh, interesting. Is
they're
that,
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna, is that, does anybody else do something similar to that, or is this something that you've just really kind of done on your own so far?
Yeah, well, I have a hard time imagining anything as original, but I haven't seen anybody
Hmm.
who does this. So yeah, I think it's mine. And then it's got a carbon fiber bridge plate, which I got from my friend Rye, GR Bear.
Hmm.
And I think got it from Sam Guidry. Works out of the Gallup shop.
Mhm.
So it's wood and a carbon fiber laminate. I really like the results of that as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's really, I didn't know that people were using carbon fiber for the bridge plates, but we just got one of Sam's guitars in, and obviously we've had Rise guitars in before, and I mean they all sound amazing. So that's a cool development to know and to watch out for, to see who else does that.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. And another reason I don't fall into any sort of traditionalist camp, um, I certainly reference, vintage instruments, and I think there's amazing things about it. But we have all those measurements, all those materials, plus some new materials. So why couldn't we make the best guitars ever right now?
Hmm.
Which I think we are. And carbon fiber in this application is lightweight, in an area that is advantageous to be lightweight, but has the required stiffness. And then it's also very hard. So in terms of the ball ends wearing through wood, like it's going to take several lifetimes to wear through the carbon fiber with the ball ends. So it's really
Hmm.
stable that way. So it's a better coupling point as well for the ball ends.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so it is really kind of combining the best of new materials with the things that make guitars great in the first place, which is the natural tone woods.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. So going back to your models for a second, so we've been discussing a new guitar that you'll be sending us. I would assume sometime later next year because it's so late in the year now.
Yeah.
Um, and it's going to be a number 5. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that model is going to be like?
Yeah, sure. I'm still fussing over the final lines of the shape itself. Um, it's a larger body guitar, dreadnought-ish, It's a
Hmm.
bit squarer. Um, you've played my guitars, and there's a lot of volume.
Hmm.
They're big sounding guitars, and so I'm really keen to try something that is a big guitar and see what we can produce. So yeah, it's dreadnought-ish. And I'm actually building my first one, excuse me, right now for a client who owns number 3 and number 4, and he is sort of helping fund the prototyping of the number 5. And
Okay,
so then the first like out and available and launched model will be the one I make for you folks for
cool.
next year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I had asked you about using a cedar that you had mentioned in one of our Tonewood articles for that, but now I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if cedar would be the best for a dreadnought size guitar. But I know it's a special cedar, so I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on potentially using that set for that particular model.
Yeah, I think it would be quite interesting. This cedar sort of defies what people think of as cedar. Its stiffness to weight ratio is very similar to a lot of my Italian spruce. It's just an interesting piece of wood. And I have a whole stack, but I pulled some out here. It's got some interesting coloring in it. I bought the estate of a deceased guitar maker about 10 years ago, and he passed away 12 years before that. So that's 22 years already. And then the wood he had, some of it's labeled from the early 70s and some from
Oh,
the late
wow.
80s. And so that's where this stuff's from. And there's a whole stack of it. I think I have maybe 30 soundboards worth, and it's all sequentially flitch matched off on the same board.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's just really gorgeous stuff. I've got a little alcohol so you can see the color of it.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you know, and so I'll see when we get closer and after I build this first prototype with the number 5. But I'm pretty keen to build one with that. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'll be excited to see that and to hear that. What do you think will be a good back and side wood for that?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. Thinking about that, I have the method I build with. It's like the hollow core back. So it's Nomex in the center and multiple layers of wood laid up around it. It's not a pure reflector. It's an active back, and I control the stiffness through the thickness and grain orientation of all the different layers.
Okay.
All that to say that while there still is a very notable difference between one species and another, I can control the characteristics of the back much more than I can with the standard braced back.
I see.
So it leaves the door pretty wide open. But I've been toying around with, and because it's going, spec and someone wants me to buy it, you don't want to make it too weird, but I like building interesting things as well. So, there's the classic like Cocobolo. This is very much like the Cocobolo folks that have in shop right now.
Hmm.
It's I think actually from the same board. Um, I have quite a bit of nice figured mahogany, which I've thought about maybe doing.
Hmm.
But I've got this one piece of wood that Jeremy Clark gave me. 52 Instruments, the guy I mentioned from Island Guitar Shop. And I forget if I said he's the one who came up with the hollow core back design.
Okay.
And I adapted it to the steel string guitar.
Cool.
But I've got this Ceylon satin wood he bought it from a shop in Montreal. I think it was in Montreal. And it had been sitting in the corner big board since the 70s, I believe. And when I moved from Montreal to here, he sorry, someone's trying to call me. I just canceled it. When I moved from Montreal to Edmonton, he came to visit me and he showed up with a set of this Ceylon satin wood. And it is like, density wise, it's like glass, it's like a Cocobolo or something like that, but it's this light colored wood and
Hmm.
it's highly figured. So it's like,
Yeah.
if I can get my head around it, and if you guys don't convince me it's a bad idea to make a weird guitar, I'm leaning towards that with a cedar top because it would stand out anywhere.
Hmm.
I know sonically it would be great, and aesthetically it would be very interesting.
Yeah. Is that more? I don't think I've ever heard of that, or I might have seen it like mentioned in one place and never saw anything again. What is it related to?
I don't know. That it's not very resinous. That's a good question. I'd have to do some research, and I'm not really sure what it's related to. And quite honestly, I look at wood maybe different than some builders do. I don't have a lot of like mystique around it.
Hmm.
It's beautiful, but I just measure it, and then I just know what its material properties are, its elasticity and its stiffness and its density and all of that. And so I just see it as something that is, related to some of the more dense rosewoods in terms of
Okay.
its material properties. Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, I'm open to that. We'll have to make sure Ben and Kim are down with that too.
Yeah. Well, we have some time to work on that. So.
Yeah. Well, sticking with the tonewood topic a little bit more, are there any tonewoods that you especially like to work with yourself, or that you think people should give more consideration to?
I love mahogany. I just think it's like it's a wood that can be used for every element of a guitar.
Hmm.
Um, I have a huge stash from that same estate of really old Honduran mahogany, and I think probably my favorite wood. It's the nicest to work with. I like how it looks. It's so a nice straight grain piece without figure is understated but beautiful, and yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
that's my favorite. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, just one of the classics.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to, or sort of related to building guitars for us versus building guitars for customers, I know that sometimes, obviously, some customers are going to be really adventurous, but I've heard from a lot of luthiers that sometimes working with a shop gives them a little more freedom to try new things. What do you find your experience with working with shops versus customers is like?
Yeah. Well, I've been really fortunate to have, I guess the whole thing I came about kind of innocently, the whole career. And so I feel like in some ways I've attracted that kind of client as well. I get a lot of clients who come to me for their first handmade guitar, who want one of my guitars, who give me complete freedom saying, what do you want to build? And often have return clients that way. And then I think my reputation was kind of built on somewhat unorthodox looking guitars, especially say 4 or 5 years ago. And so then shops took me on at that time and also gave me a lot of freedom. So I feel like I've always had a lot of freedom. There are
Hmm.
some shops that want more standard guitars. But in terms of dealers, individual clients, I have not had a lot of really concrete requests. I get a lot of freedom.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about how I just in my discussion with Mark Galliero, we talked about how what you put out at the beginning is sort of what sets the precedent for the rest of your career. And so you
Yes.
really lucked out by starting out as somebody who was a little bit more adventurous and less traditional. And so now you get to have all this freedom, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it was just the right timing. It wasn't intentional. Um, as a side note, I love Mark's guitars. Him and I, in the winter we try to chat once a week, and in the summer less often. But I'm really glad you guys are taking his stuff. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's an amazing builder, and I love his choice of woods. He's really dedicated to using domestic woods and stuff, and he does it in such an elegant way. So
Yeah. Yeah. He mentioned you too, because we were talking about like you came up in the discussion about how he stays in touch with other luthier dads. And I was
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah,
that's such a
exactly.
cute idea. Like
Yeah, we always
managing,
end up talking
yeah.
to our kids first, and then we get the guitars afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Um, well, let me go back to my question list for a second. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
What guitar would you or have you built for yourself as like your top choice guitar?
Okay, I think I mentioned this one time in an interview with North American Guitar, maybe like a written interview, but it's mahogany. I've only built one guitar for myself besides my electric. It was my very first guitar. It's extremely crude. Um, I would save it before anything I build now because I can rebuild what I build now, but I could never rebuild that that moment in time. Um, but I would do mahogany everywhere, like backsides, fingerboard, bridge, head
Hmm.
veneer, broken up just with 0.5 mil black lines, probably slightly tinted towards that sort of vintage Martin color.
Hmm.
And I would do. I really want to do a guitar that has so traditional guitars. The back is angled, and the top is sort of coplanar to the center line of the sides.
Hmm.
Um, Many elevated neck guitars, you just switch that around and you put the angle into the top or the taper into the top. I would like to do something where I split the taper in half, and have a neck come in straight on that,
Okay.
with a slight elevation. I just think it would give it this very long, lean appearance from the side,
Hmm.
but it would be all mahogany with black lines. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, I hope you
Yeah.
build that at some point so we can see what it turns out like.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll try.
Well, what's next for you? Are you going to be going to any of the festivals or shows later on this year?
Yeah. Obviously, there's been a hiatus for all of us.
Mhm.
I went to Lacona this spring, which was amazing. It was the first time I'd gone to shows where I don't have anything available, which was actually really nice to just not feel that pressure of feeling like I should try to sell something. So that was great. I wish I was going to the Fretboard Summit right away here, but I just couldn't justify it with the garden timing and whatnot.
Mhm.
But I am going to Woodstock in the fall here.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I've been wanting to go to that show. I've gone to the show as a visitor before,
Mhm.
but I haven't exhibited, and I've wanted to since the beginning of my career, pretty much. So I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Yeah, or I was just pricing out for some of us to go to Woodstock. So I'm
Awesome,
hoping that we'll get to
awesome.
go too. And at the very least, hopefully it'll be me and our photographer slash videographer, but hopefully Ben and Kim will come as well. And we'll have a whole little TNAG team there and get to meet all you guys in person because that would be so much fun.
That would be. It's such a beautiful location too. So
Hmm.
yeah, that would be amazing to meet you guys. I mean, I've met Ben, but I haven't met you or Kim. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I that's all my questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to share project wise or any just updates on your on what's going on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, probably, but not that I can think of.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed working with you folks, and I'm looking forward to continuing with that. The content you guys are putting out right now is, I think, among the best anywhere.
Well,
Uh,
thank you.
I really appreciate the. Um, there's no letting a guitar flounder. I sent you guys two earlier this year or late last year. One sold right away, one didn't. But it doesn't just die on the shelf. You guys are always generating new content stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what we look for in dealers. And for me, I could probably go without dealers right now for a while. I've got a good list of orders, etc. But um, I can't do that. I don't have the energy to do that from home, and so I really feel respected by the way you guys run your business.
Oh, well, that makes me feel happy to hear that, because obviously we love working with you, and we love doing as much as we possibly can for your guitars and for all of our Luthier's guitars, because it's obviously a pretty sweet job getting to promote guitars.
Yeah, indeed.
So in addition to the number 5 that we'll have coming later next year, we've also got a bespoke slot with you. So if somebody wants to book a totally custom guitar with you through us, they can do that. And yeah, we'll just have to watch out for you in October in Woodstock and go from there. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was so fun to get to hear more about your life and your backstory. And I'm sure all of the folks who know your guitars and already love them will love knowing all of that stuff too. So thank you so much for your time and for talking with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and a real pleasure to meet you.